Hey there, it's Paige here, and today I'm going to show you how to set up an automated webinar promo email funnel so you can make that important connection between your freebie funnels and your primary webinar sales tool. All right, so first let's look at the big picture. So I have mapped out here what an automated webinar looks like from the high level. So we have, a webinar registration. When subscribers sign up for that, then they're added to a specific list in your email service provider. And then depending on how you have that automated webinar set up, they might go to a confirmation page, or they might be redirected to the webinar playing page with kind of like 5 minutes to wait or something like that. So I've seen it done both ways. So here we're going to assume that they go directly to the webinar kind of playing page, and they just kind of have to wait for that webinar to start for a few minutes. So you might also be sending traffic directly to this webinar registration. So if you're trying to get cold audiences to bring them into your business, into your world, then, you might be running Facebook ads or posting on Facebook about your webinar, or Instagram, YouTube. You might have, specific blog posts that are promoting your webinar. You also might be getting some SEO search traffic. If your webinar is, if it's existed for a while and it's been very popular, then, it might show up under specific keywords. So you're getting a variety of traffic to your webinar registration page for cold audiences, people who aren't already on your email list. But you also have subscribers who have previously opted into your list through some kind of freebie offer. Maybe it's a challenge, or maybe it is a free course, or maybe it's some kind of PDF or some kind of training video, and they're already on your list. So the webinar promo funnel, email funnel specifically, is intended to get those people who have signed up for one of your freebie offers to your webinar, so that your webinar is acting as your primary sales tool. That's where you're going to sell the thing that you sell. And so everyone is eventually coming to this webinar registration. So this is the webinar funnel is acting kind of as your core sales funnel. And then the freebie funnels act as a pre-funnel, I guess, to where you're bringing people onto your list around certain topics, around certain outcomes, depending on, how you're doing your messaging. And then you're going to make that connection by sending them those webinar promo emails. So you're going to want to send, tease that webinar, let them know what they're going to learn, and you're going to send them to that webinar registration page. So a webinar promo email funnel might, vary anywhere from 3 to 5 emails, depending on, how it's set up and what messages you need to include. But typically you'll see anywhere from 3 to 5 emails. And the goal of that email sequence is to get them to register for the webinar. For the purpose of this demo video, we're going to focus on the webinar promo emails and how to set up an automation for that. Before we get into actually building out the automation, let's look at what it's going to look like when we get finished. So here I have set up a skeleton automation for a webinar promo sequence. And by skeleton automation, I mean that it has all the pieces, but all the emails are currently in draft form because the emails don't have the content, or it hasn't been tested. So it's not quite ready to be an active automation, but it does have all the individual actions that you need for the automation to work. So let's talk about what those actions are. The first thing you're going to need are emails, of course. So in our big picture blueprint, we had 4 emails. And so we want to represent those 4 emails also in the automation. So you can see here, we have email 1, email 2, email 3, email 4. Now we don't want the subscriber to get all the emails at once. So we also need wait actions so that there's a 1-day waiting period between getting each email. So the first email they're going to get automatically once they're added to this automation. But after they get email 1, we want it to wait a day, then send email 2, then wait a day, send email 3, then wait a day, send email 4. The third thing you're going to need is a goal. So unlike in a freebie automation, if you've watched any of my earlier videos, in a webinar promo sequence, we only want to send emails up until the point where they register for the webinar. So if they register after getting email 1, we don't want them to get any more emails because they don't need to. They're already registered. They've reached the goal that we want for subscribers in this automation. So for this automation specifically, we're going to need a goal action that's set up so that when someone reaches a specific parameter, so in this case, once they've registered for the masterclass, then the automation, they jump to this goal here and the automation ends. And that way they're not getting, emails 2, 3, and 4 because they've already reached the goal that we had set for them. The last piece you'll need for this automation is simply an end action, which we put at the end of all of our automations that we set up. Now you'll notice, especially if you've watched some of the demo videos for the freebie type funnels, that this automation doesn't have a start trigger, and that is intentional. That's because we're going to be sending people into this automation from those freebie automations that we've created earlier. So if you have a challenge funnel, or you have just a simple freebie funnel, or you have a free course, we're going to add them in those automations. We're going to use a start an automation action so that they're added to this automation automatically. So we don't need a separate list for this because it's triggered a different way. And when we move into the demo video, I'll actually take you inside one of those freebie automations and show you how we set that up. All right, now let's build it. I'm in ActiveCampaign. I'm in the automations part of my dashboard, and I have clicked on the create an automation button. I'm going to select start from scratch and continue. So ActiveCampaign is going to prompt me to add a start trigger. Now for this automation specifically, we're not going to use a trigger. So we're going to select start without a trigger, and then just go ahead and exit out of the next window. All right, so now we have our empty automation canvas. The next thing I want you to do is just to name your automation. So for my purposes, I'm going to name this the Webinar Promo Demo because that's what this is for me. Now, when naming your automation, make sure the name is clear and descriptive of what that automation represents in your business. So you may use something like Webinar Promo and then the name of the webinar, or Masterclass Promo and the name of the masterclass. So just make sure that it's clear and descriptive. All right, now it's time to add the pieces of our automation. The first thing we're going to add are the emails. So drag a send an email under sending options, send an email action in. We're going to create an email since this is a new automation. And again, when naming your emails, make sure to be clear and descriptive. I'm going to start with Webinar Promo 1, and then when I go back and add in my email content, I will add kind of the topic of that email into the name as well. After creating a new email, ActiveCampaign is going to launch its email setup wizard. And that's where you can select your template, go into your email, set up the content, test it, check links and all that. So for the purpose of this demo, we're going to just simply save and exit and go ahead and set up the skeleton. This is just a personal preference. I always set up the complete automation with placeholder emails, with draft emails, and then I go back, and that setting up the email content is the last thing I do so that I can be very focused, and so I can make sure that, I input that email content, I check the formatting, I send test emails, I check the links, and I do all of that in kind of one working session. So as a side note, before we move forward, just remember that when you first start using ActiveCampaign, to go ahead and set up your templates. By setting up a template, you'll save a lot of design time later on by not having to recreate that email and put those design settings every time you create an email automation, or even every time you send an email newsletter. And you'll notice that ActiveCampaign does provide you with lots of templates to choose from that you can start with to base your email templates off of by simply swapping, the font, the images, the colors, giving you something to start with instead of starting from scratch. All right, let's save and exit. So we have our first email selected here, and I'm just going to save it. All right, you can see here that we have a draft email for email 1 sitting in our automation. Now I'm going to repeat this process for emails 2, 3, and 4. Perfect. Now we have all 4 emails set up. The next step is to add in our wait actions. So under conditions and workflow, we're going to drag in a wait action. We're going to wait for a specified period of time. And for the purpose of this demo, we're going to wait for 1 day. So now I'm going to repeat that process to put a wait action between 2 and 3 and 3 and 4. Note that I did not add a wait action to the beginning of the email sequence, and that's because once we trigger this automation, we want the first email to send. So if we want to add some cushion between the previous automation and this automation, we're going to add a wait action to the freebie, the original, the first automation. And I'll show you how to do that here in a moment. The third thing we want to add is our goal. How do we know when this automation should stop sending emails to subscribers who've registered? So we're going to add the goal underneath the last email, and goals located underneath conditions and workflow. All right, so we're going to name this goal. I'm going to name it registered for webinar, and if I have a name for that webinar, I might put the name in there. I'm going to set up what the parameters are for this goal. Okay, so the easiest way to set up a goal like this is to set up a list that people are added to once they register for the webinar. So I'm going to type in list, and I'm going to choose in list. So once a subscriber is in a specific list, they have achieved this goal. So I'm going to select Masterclass XXX because that's my demo list, and save. All right, so once someone joins the list by registering for the webinar, they'll be pulled out of this sequence. So they'll jump to the goal action, and then the sequence will end. So we're going to select below contact's position, and if they do not make the goal, we're going to continue anyway. In this case, because it's at the end, it doesn't matter whether we continue anyway or in this automation. But if someone doesn't meet a goal and you want the automation to end if they don't meet the goal, then that's what you're going to select. So for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to go ahead and select end this automation. Perfect. Now our goal is set up. So once someone, subscribes to the webinar, doesn't matter where they are in the sequence, they're going to jump to that goal. The final thing we need to add is our end this automation action. So also under conditions and workflow, we're going to select end this automation and drag it to the bottom. Perfect. Now we have our full automation set up. So the final step would really be to go into each of the emails, which are currently drafts, to fill in the content, check the formatting, check your links, make sure your links to your webinar registration page work properly. And then once those are set up, all you have to do to activate this automation is to click active here at the top. Now remember, this automation is not going to have a trigger because we're going to trigger it inside other automations. And I'm going to show you how to do that here in just a second. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to link the automations together. So right now we're looking at the 5-day challenge automation that I showed you how to set up in a different video. So we have the challenge funnel set up, and currently at the bottom, all it does is after it sends the final challenge email, the automation ends. Now we're going to modify this automation so that once they get the final email, they're funneled into the webinar promo sequence. So we want them to sign up for that webinar because the webinar is acting as the main sales tool for whatever you're selling. So to modify this automation, we're going to drag in Start an automation underneath conditions and workflow. Then we're going to select the automation that we just set up. So webinar promo demo, apply, and save. And then the final thing we want to do is add one more wait action so that they're not getting 2 emails back to back. So after they get the final challenge email, we want the automation to wait a day. That way, once they're added to the webinar promo demo, they're going to get that first email right away as well. So there's going to be a full day between getting the final challenge email and the first email designed to get them to sign up for the webinar or the masterclass. And that's why we don't need a trigger action in the webinar promo sequence, because we're triggering it inside other automations. So you can repeat that for all of the freebie funnels that you have set up. If it makes sense for the subscriber to go into the webinar next, then you can add that start an automation for the specific webinar promo sequence for all of those freebie funnels, whether they are, for PDFs or video trainings or free courses or challenge funnels or whatever you're using in your business. That's it. That's how you set up a simple automated webinar promo sequence. That's how you connect subscribers who have previously opted into free things that you're offering, be it, free courses, PDFs, or challenges. And that's how you make sure that they get funneled into that next step, which in this case is a webinar that's acting as your main sales tool. Good luck setting up your automated webinar promo email funnel.